Welcome back to the Eric Krown Crypto channel. Wishing you a happy, healthy start to this nice Thursday morning over here as we get prepared for another day. Another day, the day after yesterday, essentially. It's just another day in cryptocurrency land, but we do have a few things to be speaking about as Bitcoin does initiate the bounce that we were looking for yesterday in the short-term timeframes, and then how that kind of looks like for today, and then how that can bleed on over into the higher-term timeframes, of which I'll save the majority of the higher-term timeframe analysis for not yesterday, but tomorrow when it's more relevant. Other than that, I wanted to once again give some quick notice to the sale going on, as we do have a little bit less than a day for the rest of the sale with 20% off. As always with any one of these programs, with any one of these indicators, please watch the promotional videos that accompany them. They will explain who they're for, who they're not for, what's essentially included, so that you can make an educated decision for yourself if that is relevant to you or not. Other than that, Instagram, I've been uploading like a madman there. I've also been uploading some of the reels that I've been doing onto YouTube here as well. So if you're interested in such things and you want them first, then the link is in the description below. And without further ado, let's just jump into it right now. So yesterday we were looking for a bit of a bounce on Bitcoin, as it did hit a technical target to the downside based off of the descending triangle that we saw right here, and that was met at the 18,400 to 18,500 region, as you can see. And then also we did observe some regular bullish divergence off these lows, coming off of the last actual three lows, or actually got the trend line already in there, from the lows of 19th of August, the lows of 29th of August, and obviously the low that we just saw yesterday on the 7th, or sorry, 2 days ago on the 7th of September. So with that in mind, what does that essentially mean for today? Well, we have played out the easy portion of that move already with the move to the 21 exponential average. As we did say yesterday, anywhere around like mid 19s was fine. Looks like Bitcoin got up on spot price action basically to 19.5, so fair enough is fair enough in this case. Now we have a few competing signals being born upon on the other side. So this is where things become a little bit more, a little more nuanced in the short-term time frames, and I'm not super interested in this particular analysis, to be honest with you. But as far as it goes right now, yes, there is some hidden bearish divergence forming on the 4-hour time frame between this high on the 6th of September and of course this high that we could potentially be seeing on, well, today basically. So that is not only consistent on the 4-hour but also on the 6-hour, as we do have ever so slightly higher highs on 6-hour RSI and even the 12-hour as well, of which, yes, we did see those bullish divergence drives kind of already play out, or again, at least the easy portion of that play out. So this is where things become a lot more, a lot more careful, a lot more nuanced. In my experience, these sort of moves, they're not like the moves that I'm necessarily looking for, as I'm looking for the more obvious ones. And in this case, if we go back down to the 4-hour, well, we can come up with a few validation points for either continuation to the upside or confirming this as a local high, thus confirming hidden bearish divergence on basically the 4, 6, and 12-hour, and probably getting another test back down somewhere around that 18,500-ish region. And it'd be it'd be coming in from this angle over here. Any sort of an hourly closure below $19,000, and then yes, I would confirm this as a local high, and that's very likely going to spill on over into the 4, 6, and 12, and very likely beget another test back down somewhere around 18.5 or so, give or take a small number from that. To the upside, I would be looking for continuation if we do see on CME any sort of an hourly closure basically back above about 19,600, or a 4-hour closure above about 19,550. If one of those two criteria is met, then I would be looking for actually great continuation all the way up towards about $20,000, give or take about $100 from that number. And then I want to come back to it after that. But for right now, it does look like the downside is being a little bit more respected here. I would also combine that with something that I haven't looked at in a while on video, because it just hasn't been super relevant. But in this case, the funding rates, if we do go down into the hourly, you can see that on yesterday's low and the day prior than that at the $18,500 region, we were printing some pretty negative numbers as far as funding rates go, and now they're ever so slightly positive. So a lot of the time you will see that kind of operate as a good indication that, one, the bounce is likely beginning over here, and then two, the easy portion of the bounce is probably going to start to get faded over here. But here's the thing, Bitcoin can play out a short-term downside move, something like this, if you will, and then pop back up and put in the actual rally to the upside, of which I do think that is in some ways likely here. So a bit of a nuanced interpretation of this, but let's go visit stochastic momentum on the short-term time frame. So on the 12-hour right here, we will be observing it turning to the upside, also with bullish divergence with any sort of a closure above 18,600. If we go down to the 6 hour, same thing, 18,600 going to be the magical number and remains with upside momentum. The 4 hour also pivoted at 18,650. So all these coming in within the same region, and momentum remains the upside. And the hourly is also going to be probably flippy floppy, but down below 19.2. So very, very short term. I do think that Bitcoin probably does come back down and test around that region. Probably does even close below if I had to guess. And then I'd be looking for that move into the mid 18s. But the real question is, does Bitcoin actually start to close below the current low? Because until we do see a closure at minimum on a 4 hour time frame below 18,500, I do think that you probably get something more or less like this, another trap situation as everyone gets super scared, and then the real rally, of which that's the one that I'd be a lot more interested in. So in this case, I would also put out another piece of criteria that if you do see a closure on a 4 hour time frame below 18,500, that's at the point where I would really be looking for Bitcoin to take the next $1,000 leg to the downside. I do think it's a little bit less likely in the short term here, although higher term timeframes, which we'll get to soon enough, paint a bit of a different picture. But of course, you can play out many different moves on a 4 hour time frame within the context of a 5 day or a weekly or a monthly trending move, of which we've visited those charts probably too much at this point. So I don't want to bore you too much with the details and want to be focusing a little more on the short term timeframes here, where I think things are just more nuanced and more interesting for the for today at least. But in this case, yes, any sort of a closure below that region, and I would be looking for the next $1,000 leg down somewhere between about 17,000 to 17,500 if that were to occur. But here's the thing: as we go into the higher term timeframes, I want to revisit this chart over here. This is the 2 day time frame. This is the chart that's really been governing a lot of our downside biases as of late, as of the past few months here. And it's been incredibly consistent and has once again, had a great signal. So in this case, what essentially is the signal or the signature? Well, we're looking at volatility versus momentum, stochastic momentum, and the volatility of stochastic momentum actually, which is represented by this metric right here that my cursor is currently on. Anytime that gets down to extreme lows, which I define as anywhere reasonably close to this green horizontal line, and then turns up and expands from these extreme lows, the average move has been 39.43%. Done over the course of about 3.5 weeks. The stochastic oscillator has gone the correct direction on that volatility expansion about 87.5% of the time. Obviously, that number is going to go up here because, once again, it worked from the last signal given. And then the first standard deviation, which represents where we expect about 68% of the results to kind of fall between, would represent a range between about 32% all the way up to just under 47%. So again, if we go back into this signal, there's a few things of interest right here. Well, one, the 2 day time frame is closing tonight, and the 2 day time frame momentum pivot is currently at 19,900. So assuming that Bitcoin remains below that level by closure tonight, which I believe is 5 p.m. Central Standard Time, then this signal is still active. But here's the thing: with the stochastic oscillator already down here in the critical regions, it's very difficult to maintain momentum at these levels for a long period of time. As you can see, usually when it gets within this region, which has been few and far between for the full history of CME, these have been more or less kind of bouncy areas, if you will. So the thing is that as we're kind of putting the puzzle piece together here, obviously, or I wouldn't say obviously, but likely tonight, we're not going to see it close above the 19,900-ish region. The thing is, when it closes tonight, and we get the new open, this number is going to change naturally, and I imagine it's probably going to come down a lot. So that would give the potential for price action within the next 2 days, the next two closing daily periods, to turn back up. And if that happens, I would call this signal essentially well done. We've seen the totality of it. And for right now, we do have the averages on what we kind of expect these signals to kind of play out from. And in this case, the average days from the signal given to the next major high or low has been about 24 days. And we observed this signal basically on the 23rd to the 25th of August. So from there to kind of where we're at right now puts us at about 15 days. So this signal is, it's getting pretty mature here. And we've already seen about 18% or 17.5%. About 17.5% of this signal, already, be represented in price action. And again, the average move that we kind of do expect, at least on the bottom side of the first standard deviation, would be about 32%. So, is it within the context of that? It still would kind of be on the lower end, which is why I do keep this open-ended until the signal is officially ended, which would be notified by, again, this flip happening over here. So Probably unlikely today unless we see like a ginormous rally. But in the next couple days after that, that number should come down. And if Bitcoin does start to close above those regions, especially on this time frame, at that point, I'd say, hey, that's the end of it. We're very likely looking for a greater bounce after that, probably into the 20,000 plus regions in the following couple weeks, if that were to happen. But until then, very specifically here, probabilities are still on the downside. Short term, yes, I do think Bitcoin's literally testing to the downside in the short term right now. The question is, does it actually break the range lows? If it does, then I would be looking for another retest of about 18.5. And then that's where the real, where the real questions are, I suppose, for right now. But you're kind of if you've been in tune with this analysis today, you're probably seeing me be a little bit less aggressive in what I say compared to the last like few weeks. The last few weeks was the easy calls to the downside. Right here, coming off these levels after a technical target was hit, after the last major low was essentially retested. These are typically bouncy regions, so I wouldn't be surprised to see again another move, something like this perhaps, where Bitcoin comes down, boom, and then we see an actual try to the upside. And that's the real question: does Bitcoin start to close above the pivots that we observed on this chart up here? If it does, I would really start to look to extend these bounces to the upside. Until then, probabilities, statistics do still say, be observant, be aware that more downside is likely from here. And if we look at these numbers, again, keeping in mind that Bitcoin's already played out about 17.5%. But the thing is that if we even see about 32%, that would put Bitcoin, at about 16,000 bucks or so, as a kind of eyeball it right there. So I do want to be cognizant of that. Anyways, I think that's a good place to leave off on today's analysis. Again, be aware to the upside about 19,550, to the downside short term about 19 even basically. Other than that, we'll come back tomorrow and we'll have a lot to talk about on the higher term timeframes, which is really going to judge the biases, basically throughout the end of this month. So with that said, I want to be wishing you the best as always. Take care, much love, and see you hopefully soon.